Okay. In this video, I'm going to talk about operant conditioning. Now, operant conditioning is a little bit easier to understand than classical conditioning, but there is the question of schedules of reinforcement, and people do have a little bit of a hard time with that. So make sure you watch that video a few times. But I'm going to start with the easy part, which is the operant conditioning. Now, in operant conditioning, we always have a behavior plus or minus a reward or a punishment. At one point, you're going to be studying classical and operant conditioning, and you're going to be like, what? Which one's which? Well, in classical conditioning, there's always two stimuli and a response. And then operant conditioning, there's always a behavior, and that behavior is going to be modified with a reward or a punishment. So, if a boy gives flowers to a girl and that results in getting a kiss, that's a reward. And that means this is going to incentivize that boy to give more flowers in the future. But if giving a flowers to a girl results in getting slapped, well, that's a punishment. And so that is going to incentivize the boy to not give flowers anymore. So that's the simple part of it. Okay. Um, uh, it was E.L. Thorndike who first did a study on operant conditioning. And E.L. Thorndike was technically a functionalist and not a behaviorist, but his research was a piece of research that uh, focuses on operant conditioning in any case. He didn't use the right language, but he was talking about that specific topic. So what did he do? He put a cat in a box like the one you're seeing there on your screen. And if you look in the box has a lever. And if the cat pressed the lever, the door would open. But of course, cats are not very good at pressing levers. And so what it did is it scratched at the bars, it dug at the floor, it meowed and screamed and jumped around. And usually by mistake, it hit the lever. The door would open and the cat would escape. Just like classical conditioning, you can't just do this once. You have to do it over and over and over again. So Thorndike went out, found the cat, put it back in the box, and again, the cat jumped around and screamed and dug, but eventually, by mistake, it hit the lever and then it would get out. By doing this over and over again, the cat would start making connections. It's something about the back of the box. It's something about this red lever. It's something about touching the red lever and then eventually pressing it just right until the cat learns it. And when Thorndike puts it in, the cat doesn't try to scratch or dig or anything else. What it does is it goes straight for the lever, presses the lever, and escapes. That's E.L. Thorndike. Again, Thorndike was not a behaviorist, he was a functionalist. On the other hand, this is B.F. Skinner, and B.F. Skinner was a behaviorist. And B.F. Skinner focused on operant conditioning, and he would put animals in what we now call Skinner boxes uh, to press a lever or hit a button or stuff like that. If you've ever seen a squirrel water ski or a chicken play the piano or something like that, you have Skinner to thank for those. A lot of those types of tricks that we teach animals come from behaviorism and how behaviorists taught us to modify behaviors. Now, I kind of already told you that Thorndike didn't use the right language because Thorndike was a functionalist. And so he talked about how the cat felt. And he would say things like a satisfying state of affairs for the cat. That is, the cat was glad to be out of the box. Behaviorists hate that kind of language. They talk better about just the behavior. In this case, operant, meaning voluntary behaviors, um, and modifying operant behaviors. And so we call this operant conditioning. That is the modification of voluntary behaviors. Now, another aspect of uh, operant conditioning is that punishments will decrease behaviors. But punishments aren't always the same thing for everybody. For some people, if I put you in your room, if I ground you and I say, go to your room, that's a punishment. You feel alone and you get bored and you don't want to be there. But other people aren't like that. Some people, you put them in their room and they take a nap or they play a video game or they read a book, and that's not a punishment for them. So a punishment is specifically something that makes you unhappy. And it has to make you unhappy for it to be a punishment and in turn decrease the behavior. If it makes you happy, then it's a reward. And the reward gonna do? The reward or the reinforcement is going to increase the behavior. So if I send you to your room for not doing your chores and you're happy about that, then I've just reinforced the behavior of not doing the chores. This kid is going to do the chores less and less because you're just going to send him to his room and he's just going to read a book. He's going to feel happy about that. You'll see this a lot with kids in school. For some kids, if you call their name and you single them out as having done something wrong, that's a punishment. They feel embarrassed and angry, and they're going to decrease whatever behavior was punished. But some kids don't get angry. Some kids get happy when you call their name, especially kids that don't get a lot of attention at home feel glad to be noticed. And so that kid is not going to decrease their behavior. In fact, they might increase their behavior because reinforcements increase behaviors. Let me give you an example here. Let's say you have Daffy Duck here, and Daffy gets upset and he decides to fight, right? So that's the behavior, fighting. Well, in this scenario, Daffy gets punished. Look at him. He got beat up and he's very upset about that. So the next time that Daffy feels angry, what is he going to do? Well, he's probably not going to fight because the last time he fought, he got punished for that. But we can change it up. Here's Daffy. Daffy wants to fight again. That's the behavior. But this time, he got a reward. He got a reinforcement because he beat up the other guy. Look at poor Elmer there. So now, the next time Daffy gets angry, what is he going to do? Well, he's likely to become violent again, fight again, because the last time he did it, he was reinforced. And so the behavior becomes a more commonplace. Now, one thing that people always get messed up is the idea of positive reinforcements, positive punishments, negative reinforcement, negative punishment. In operant conditioning, the word positive does not mean good. It does not mean good. It means that something was added. It's like math. We added something. Whereas negative doesn't mean bad. Negative means that something was subtracted. And so, therefore, a reinforcement can be positive or negative, and a punishment can be positive or negative. And I'm going to give you some examples here. Let's say you go to the gym to lose weight and you end up losing some weight by going to the gym. Well, in this scenario, the behavior is going to the gym. Okay, that's what you're doing. Now, did we add or subtract something? Think about it. Okay, we subtracted something. We subtracted the weight. You lost the weight. Now, what do we call it when we subtract something? Okay, subtracting is a minus sign, it's negative. Okay. And what did we subtract? We subtracted the fat, the weight, right? So in this, wait, and are you happy or unhappy about losing the weight? Well, most people are going to be happy that they lost the weight. And what do we call it when you're happy about the end response? Well, we call that a reinforcement. So in this scenario, you have a negative reinforcement. Negative because we subtracted something, and a reinforcement because whatever we subtracted made you happy. So if you have a reinforcement, what's going to happen to the behavior in the future? It's going to increase. You're going to go to the gym more. Let's do another one. In this scenario, you wait until the last minute to do your project, but you still got a B. So what's the behavior here? The behavior here is procrastination, waiting until the last minute. Now, did we add or subtract something? Think about it. Here we added something. What do we call it when we add something? We call it positive. And just to be sure, what did we add? We added the grade, in this case, the B. That wasn't there before, that was given afterwards, after the behavior. And are you happy or unhappy with the B? Now, if you procrastinated, there's a good chance that you're very happy with that B because you could have gotten a bad grade since you procrastinated. What do we call it when you're happy about the response or the end result? We call it a reinforcement. And in this case, you have a positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement. It's positive because we added something, a grade. And it's a reinforcement because you're happy about it. So if we have a positive reinforcement, what's going to happen to the behavior in the future? The behavior should increase. Reinforcements always make the behaviors increase. I use this example because it's something we all try to not do. We all try to not procrastinate. And yet, if we keep on getting reinforced for our procrastination, we continue to do it. And in fact, the behavior gets worse and worse. Now, here's another example. You talk back to your parents, and so you got your car taken away. What's the behavior here? Talking back. Now, did we add or subtract something here? So after you talk back, we subtracted something. And what do we call it when we subtract something? We call it negative. So a minus sign is negative. And just to be sure, what did we subtract from the situation? The car. Your parents took away your car privilege. And are you happy or unhappy that your car was taken away? Most people are going to be unhappy with that. And what do we call it when the end result makes you unhappy? Call it a punishment. And so in this scenario, we have a negative punishment. Negative because we're subtracting, and punishment because it made you unhappy. And so what's going to happen to the behavior? Well, whenever you get punished, the behavior should decrease. And so therefore, you're going to talk back less. Okay, we're going to do one more. So you ate too much candy and you got a bellyache. What's the behavior here? The behavior is eating too much candy. Now, did we add or subtract something here? Well, after you ate too much candy, you got something. We added. And what do we call it when we add? A plus sign, we call it positive. To be sure, what did we add in this scenario? We added a bellyache, the pain. Are you happy or unhappy with your bellyache? Most of us are going to be unhappy that we have a bellyache. And what do we call it when you are unhappy with the end result? we call it a punishment. So here we have a positive punishment. It's positive because we added something, and it's a punishment because you're unhappy with the results. And so punishments always decrease behavior. And so in this scenario, a punishment should make you eat less candy. Again, here's the recap. Positive means something was added to the situation. Negative means something was subtracted from the situation. Something is a punishment if the end result makes you unhappy, and something is a reinforcement if the end result makes you happy. And of course, why is this important? Because a punishment decreases behavior and a reinforcement increases behavior.
Now, hopefully you got a chance to watch the Big Bang Theory video on YouTube, and you saw Sheldon trying to modify Penny's behavior using a positive reinforcement. Positive because he was adding something, a chocolate, and a reinforcement because Penny seemed to really like the chocolates. Now, they did make one mistake that I want to point out. Sort of in the middle of the scene, they talk about electroshock, or you see their Sheldon spraying Leonard with water. And they call that negative reinforcement. That's a common mistake. A lot of people call that negative reinforcement because they think that negative reinforcement means punishment. But of course, that's not what it means. This would be a positive punishment. It's positive because you're adding something, the spray, and it's a punishment because clearly Leonard doesn't like that. The same thing is true with electroshock. Electroshock, you would be adding the electroshock, and the person receiving it would not like that. And so that would be a positive punishment. Again, that's one of the only mistakes that they make in the little scene there. But overall, it's a pretty good explanation of operant conditioning.
Now, there is a problem with punishment. Specifically, um, a lot of times we will punish kids or animals, but punishment really isn't as good at a teaching tool as reinforcements. Oftentimes, we will stop doing the behavior just to avoid the punishment. And that sounds good, but as soon as the punishment is gone, we often go back to the behavior. Because again, punishments often teach avoidance, but they don't teach you the right behavior. And so, um, also, avoidance isn't always a good reaction to things. Sometimes we avoid things without really understanding whether or not that's the problem. So, an example, you have two little kids, and big brother pushes little sister to the ground, and mom gets mad, and mom punishes big brother. You would like big brother to think the reason I got punished is because I hit my sister. And so in the future, I should not hit my sister. But little kids don't always think that way. And so what the little kid might end up doing is avoiding the sister altogether. He might think, every time I'm around my sister, I get punished. And so therefore, I should avoid being around my sister. Now, if you rewarded good behavior instead, then the child would learn, when I hang out with my sister and I play nice, I get rewards. And so that child is more likely to continue to do the good behaviors and stop doing the bad behaviors. Um, Again, punishments don't teach the alternative or acceptable behavior. And so, what the kid ends up doing is avoiding the behavior until they can't avoid it anymore or until the punishment is gone. and then they go back to doing the behavior. Another big problem with punishments is that they often have undesirable results. The child might become hostile or passive, or it might create fear in the child. uh, Boys often become hostile. That is, they live in a house where people are always punishing him. And so what the boy learns is everybody treats me bad. And so they develop angst and they develop anxiety. And now any little thing sort of makes them angry. Girls often develop passivity and fear. And so now what they end up doing is they try to never make people angry. They let people walk all over them, things like that. So oftentimes the wrong lesson is learned. And of course, punishments model aggression. We'll talk a little bit about observational learning later. But if when I make mom angry, mom hits me. Well, what I learned is that when I get angry, then I should hit people too, because mom has modeled aggression. Um, and a lot of kids learn this way, and they learn all the wrong lessons of punishment. Now, I think it's important to point out that yes, rewarding is better than punishment, but especially if you have kids, you're not going to go 18 years of life without punishing a kid. That's very unlikely. But you should always try to reward more. If the kid pushes the sister and you punish the kid, well, next time you see the child playing nicely with the sister, go out of your way to reward them. And a reward can be simple, something like, good job. Oh, I'm so proud of you. You're such a good big brother. Things like that are enough. Not everything has to be a treat. Not everything has to be money. Uh, Sometimes simple social interactions can be considered positive uh, reinforcement for the child. In the packet, you're going to do a couple of activities. And one of the activities is going to ask you to figure out the difference between classical conditioning and operant conditioning. And so the hint there is if it's operant conditioning, there must always be a behavior, and that behavior is then rewarded or punished. Okay. If that doesn't work, then see if classical conditioning works. Classical conditioning always has two stimuli, two things that you can either see, smell, taste, hear, or touch. And one of those stimuli naturally gives you a response, and then eventually you learn to respond to the neutral stimulus. Okay. Um, and another activity is going to ask you to tell the difference between rewards and punishments, positive and negatives. Something is a reward if it makes you happy. The end result makes you happy. Something is a punishment if the end result makes you upset or sad. Now, positive and negative is different. Something is positive if we added something. If we add a reward, then it's a positive reinforcement. If we add a punishment, then it's a positive punishment. Whereas negative is when we take something away. If I take away something you don't like, you don't have to do your chores today, then that's a reward, it's a reinforcement. And specifically, it's a negative reinforcement. I took away the chores and you're happy about that. Negative reinforcement. There could also be a negative punishment. If I take away something you like, I take away your uh, car privileges, then this is a negative punishment. It's negative because I took something away, the car, and it's a punishment because you are unhappy with the results. So think about that as you do your packet.